The very first of its kind, a legendary High-Impact Longbow. Think of a Mercury-A as the wish ender, but well, legendary. It has a longer draw time than existing lightweight and precision frame bows, but with the ability to overpenetrate targets, and of course just deal more damage per shot. And it turns out this longer draw time might not even be a problem, as I'll get into later in the video. For this and other weapon reviews going forwards, I want to change up the structure a little, focusing on more hidden or obscure features, which might not be immediately apparent when first trying out a given weapon. So to accommodate this alongside the usual Godroll guide and other such information, I'll split the review into these sections. First then, what role should you be looking out for? For me, there's a big standout pairing with a few flex options in each major column. You may notice the green highlighted options share uncanny resemblance to the role found on the Banshee sold multimach, and the multimach can hold its weight in comparison to it, with only 2 hits required to activate kinetic tremors and 5 hits required to activate attrition orbs, with the 3 hits from kinetic tremors counting towards this. Worth noting that kinetic tremors is only 2 hits if this perk is enhanced. At base it is 3. So if you have a tier 1 role of Mercury-A, it is significantly worse. Enough so that I would suggest holding off on using this weapon at all until you can get it to drop at tier 2 or above. Attrition orbs is not as much of a must have when compared to kinetic tremors, so in column 3 there is alternatives. Successful warm up will reduce draw time, which is all the more effective on a bow such as this because of a bigger time save on a higher base draw time, and Demolitionist will provide grenade energy. Even more effective if taking out multiple enemies per shot with the overpenetration arrows, or just with kinetic tremors AoE capabilities. Columns 1 and 2 alongside the masterwork, the only stats you really need to look for is reload and draw time. Also, Mercury-A has a choice of 3 origin traits, all of them being pretty good too. The most interesting is for sure tenacity. This grants a stacking bonus to handling, reload and damage. Yes, damage. These stacks are gained per final blow, so long as you are within 15 meters of an enemy, so you can't really blink from afar. And this caps out at 20 stacks. At this point you will have a plus 40 reload, plus 40 handling, and 10% increased damage. This will also remain active until you either complete the activity you're in, or lost on death. If you are playing aggressive, which this weapon can unexpectedly do very well, this origin trait offers so much, in fact better than a lot of existing perks. Another option is Vanguard's Determination. This one requires a class ability usage to activate, and after this weapon final blows will grant a stack of damage resist up to 3 stacks, with each stack providing 2% DR. This is fine, especially if you're playing Hunter with a lower base class cooldown, but I feel like a max of 6% damage resist, which will fall off after 12 seconds, doesn't really hold up compared to 10% extra damage alongside reload and handling. The final origin trait is High-Impact Breach armaments. This one has existed for a while and simply increases damage against vehicles and constructs. The damage boost is reasonable though, at 15% against vehicles and 30% against constructs. The problem being is there's just not enough of these enemy types to typically be worth it, so most of the time I'd say go with tenacity. As established, the recommended Godroll is attrition orbs and kinetic tremors, and the activation for this, assuming tier 2 or higher, is 5 hits per orb and 2 hits per tremor proc, but it doesn't really matter how these hits come around. Here is 3 methods of using the bow: either not drawing the shot at all, half drawing the shot, or fully drawing the shot. Against what you would expect, the less of a bow is drawn optimally, the better the DPS against a single target, and this will only increase more so against multiple, as a kinetic tremor shock wave will tag all of them within AoE range. Each kinetic tremor proc will be adding 663 damage total, which is around 1.5 times a perfectly drawn crit shot. While kinetic tremors activations can't overlap with each other, since it's only 2 hits per activation, the uptime on tremors is incredibly high. Compared to how long it takes to fully draw a shot, the roll I had this was 792 MS. Either half drawing or not drawing at all was not actually a huge damage loss on simply the impact damage alone, ignoring the rapid tremor and orb activations at the following values. So a fully drawn perfect shot hit for a 441 crit. For a half draw hit, this is a 384 crit, which is 87% of the damage potential, and if you don't draw at all, this was a 267 crit, which is 60% of the damage potential. And while on paper no draw is actually the best DPS, it is a bit unwieldy to use, and only really recommend doing this at very close range due to the kind of weird drop-off trajectory of the arrow. However, even this method of firing will overpenetrate targets if you can line it up properly. Half drawing is much easier to use with a straight firing shot, while also being able to overpenetrate. You can judge the timing of this with the crosshair and the information on the bow model itself. You want the crosshair to just start moving inwards, and check the side of the bow. There's a kind of progress bar on it. Orange is half draw, and it will flash green for a perfectly drawn shot, which we won't actually be needing that much, to be honest. Overpenetrating targets will naturally hugely increase damage too. This can be thought of as just an additional AoE type effect, but it's not always available or even viable, though should be utilised whenever possible. Hitting multiple targets per shot will actually count towards an attrition orbs proc, but will not provide any additional progress towards kinetic tremors. The only way to get this to activate is to fire 2 individual shots into one enemy, not hit 2 enemies with a single shot. In regular gameplay, you'll probably be wanting to half draw on repeat and use this bow as a more close to mid-range option rather than a long-range plinker as may have been the intended design. You will need to be somewhat close to collect the ridiculous amount of orbs generated anyway. Turns out that Mercury-A is basically just multimach, but it is a featured weapon, so can be used with the avant-garde modifier active. This isn't saying it cannot be used like a regular bow, however. In harder content, 40 light below or higher, bows have been viable as they can be used safely from a distance, and what may make Mercury-A more viable than existing precision and lightweight bows is the kind of damage breakpoints. At least from my testing in -40 content, the Mercury-A can reliably one-tap red bar enemies with a fully drawn shot. If a precision frame bow requires 2 shots per enemy, then despite its lower draw time, it may turn out to be a fair bit worse when it comes to time to kill. This is very much a case by case basis, however, and let's be real, there's not actually that many situations where you are purely using a primary weapon to mow through red bars, when there's just so many ability spam builds available which are usually much more effective. Which does leave primary weapons to be a bit of a utility choice, which of course the Godroll of Mercury-A can actually provide this. So for synergies, there's a lot. Any build which heavily utilises orbs of power is a given. Star Eater scales, special ammo finishers, Font and Surge mod upkeep is just a few I can think of, as well as if you want to invest into the health stat and use orbs as a method of sustain. But more specifically, these options should also be considered. The armor set effect bonuses of either Techsec or Bushido. Techsec's 2-part bonus provides a huge kinetic weapon damage increase against shields. These can be typical elemental shields, or overshields provided by Lucent Moth Sorbo's pyramid deployables. Against these you gain a 200% damage increase, and you will know when this is active due to critical hits versus shields. The 4-part bonus will build on top of a shield breaking effect, so that when you remove a shield with a kinetic weapon, a shockwave will proc similar to kinetic tremors, but only the single shock. However, this one does have the additional benefit of disorientating nearby enemies. Really useful in enemy dense activities, as you can target the shielded enemy and all of these effects will be active. You'll get increased damage, you'll get your natural kinetic tremors proc, and you'll get the extra tremor proc on shield break, you'll disorientate enemies, and you'll probably be generating multiple orbs from AoE kinetic tremor damage. And also, if there's not any shielded enemies, you can still benefit from this effect by defeating any elite or higher enemy with a kinetic weapon. This will trigger the same disorientating shockwave. The Techsec armor can also drop from any solo ops or fireteam ops portal activity, and as such very easy to obtain. Bushido's 2-part bonus provides small health bump every time you defeat a target with a freshly drawn or reloaded weapon. Since bows have a mag size of 1 and need to be reloaded between every shot, this healing effect will be pretty much permanently active. Bushido's 4-part bonus wants you to use bows as one of its featured weapon types. Whenever you land a final blow, you will be granted resist times 1, which is a 10% damage resist for 7 seconds, and further bow kills will refresh this time. Bushido can drop from Pinnacle Ops portal activities, so is also quite easy to obtain. As a bow, Mercury-A can benefit from hierarchy if needs, even more so than just the added damage, as the tracking missiles will count towards the 5 hit requirements of attrition orbs. So each shot is essentially 4 out of 5 progress, as 3 missiles are added each time. Adding the kinetic tremor hits, and you are generating an orb pretty much every single shot. And while this is great, I will state just to be clear that hierarchy only adds missiles to fully drawn shots. But if orb generation is your goal, this is a very good method. What is unfortunately not so great is Oath Keepers, since this exotic's bonus damage only starts to ramp up following that perfect draw, which is not optimal here, so this can be mostly skipped. I think that's most I have for Synergies, but I probably missed a few bits, and if I have, let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching.